Welcome to the Leader Impact Podcast. We are a community of leaders with a network in over 350 cities around the world, dedicated to optimizing our personal, professional, and spiritual lives to have impact. This show is where we have a chance to listen and engage with leaders who are living this out. We love talking with leaders, so if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions to make the show even better, please let us know. Best way to stay connected in Canada is through our newsletter at leaderimpact.ca or on social media at LeaderImpact. If you're listening from outside of Canada, check out our website at leaderimpact.com. I'm your host, Lisa Peters, and our guest today is Jason Jaggard. Jason is an entrepreneur, coach, and author dedicated to inspiring the world to pursue nobility. His work has been translated in over 50 languages and featured in Forbes, Fast Company, Entrepreneur, MarketWatch, Under 30 CEO, the Global Leadership Network, and Chief Executive Magazine. He is the founder and CEO of Novus Global, a community of elite executive coaches serving the world's best leaders and teams to go beyond high performance. Jason is also the co-founder of the Meta Performance Institute, a non-traditional incubator for world-class coaching, leadership, and management. He is the executive producer and primary host for the award-winning Beyond High Performance podcast, featuring interviews with world-class executive coaches, billionaires, New York Times best-selling authors, business leaders, professional athletes, activists, and award-winning entertainers. Jason has recently released a new book titled Beyond High Performance: What Great Coaches Know About How the Best Get Better. In his book, he shares insights that help leaders and teams avoid burning out while simultaneously working to burn brighter than ever before. Welcome to the show, Jason. It is great to finally meet you.
Lisa, it's nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, I loved reading your bio. My first question, I'm going right to your bio, because I've never heard anyone say, inspiring the world to pursue nobility.
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
Oh, thank you.
Can you give me a little bit on that? Well, just because I got to know.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it's always a little vulnerable to talk about what you want to dedicate your life to, especially if there's something that has, in some ways, like a moral component to it, because you always set yourself up to be a hypocrite. But, you know, when I was a kid, there was a play that I was a part of, and part of the play was memorizing ancient proverbs. And so it was a really awesome play. And anyway, one of the ancient proverbs was, "A noble man makes noble plans, and by noble deeds he stands." And, you know, I probably memorized lots of stuff when I was a kid. I don't know why I forgot everything else, but that stuck to my ribcage. And so since I was little, I was really interested in this idea of what does it mean to be noble, and not like, you know, nobility like a class system or anything, but like, what does it mean to be good in an extraordinary way? And so at our firm, we actually break nobility down into four things. We break it down into prosperity, which, like, you know, being successful, not only just in finances, but certainly including finances. Community, so not just being successful by yourself, but being successful with others. Creativity, which is being successful with others in a way that's allowing you to be unique and to find your unique expression in the world. And then the last piece is generosity. So nobility for us is finding a way of being prosperous financially with other people in a healthy way, in a way that's natural to you and your giftedness, and then giving that away to others. And if you can really lean into those four things, we think that creates a really beautiful life, an extraordinary life, and we would say a noble life.
Wow, that is fantastic. I find that amazing. I am doing a study of Proverbs this summer.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking your scripture came from like King James, because my new English, my new language does not sound out.
It doesn't sound like that. And you know, those four values. Now you mentioned Proverbs. Those four values I ripped off from Proverbs 31.
Ripped off.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, you can rip it off.
Yeah. You know, I think you know, when Solomon collected that stuff, he doesn't mind if we steal it and use it. And so So if you read Proverbs 31. You'll see, you know, other things certainly, but you'll see those four ideas embedded in that particular chapter, and I just love it.
Oh, I'm on I think 24 right now, so I'm gonna just skip ahead.
Nice.
That is great.
And not to go too much into this, but also just to geek out on the Proverbs for a second. I'm actually, this is weird to say, but every morning I wake up and I take a proverb and I put it in my own words, and then I actually text it to over 200 people. And so, if you know, I don't know if this is interesting to your listeners, but if you want to get a daily text from me, we can put that information in the show notes or whatever. And I love it. I did the whole Psalms already, so I've already put the Psalms into my own words, and that took about 2 years. And now I'm doing the Proverbs. That'll take another 2 years. I'm about halfway done.
Wow. That is, I love that because I read it and I put it in my own words. And those are the notes that I just write myself because we have to understand it as we understand it, like today, you know.
Yeah. Solomon, it was written a long time ago.
Yeah. And he writes it to his son, the letters, but it's really to all of us.
Yeah.
Female, male. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Super fun. Yeah. Thanks.
This was meant to happen.
Right. Come on. We're doing it.
All right. So for anyone who's been listening over the summer, we sort of changed our questions to a little, well, we went with the summer series, but it's really been going really well. And we talk about leadership questions on pivotal turning points, principles of success, and more. And again, it's been so successful. We're going to ask you similar questions because the content has been so different and so good. So are you ready?
Love it. I'm ready. And I've listened to a few of your episodes in some ways to prepare for this, but also just invest in myself. Yeah. And I've loved it. So I'm excited to play. Let's do it.
Well, coming from a leadership guru, I am excited. All right. So we're looking for a bit of your own professional story and how you got to where you are today. Can you give us a couple of snapshots that were pivotal turning points along that journey?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was raised, and maybe you probably cut this out because you mentioned talking about God at the end. But the problem was I was like raised in church, and it was a huge part of my formative experience.
Yeah, you go.
Yeah, sorry. So I wish I could have a more interesting backstory, but I was raised in a fairly healthy spiritual community, and which had a huge emphasis. I talk about this in the introduction of my book. It had a huge emphasis on just striving to be an extraordinary person. Mm-hmm. And so in my mind, you look for role models, you look for heroes and things like that. So in my mind, the people who were leading that faith community were like the people I looked up to. And so I was like, hey, that's what I want to do for a living. And so I went to school and studied, spiritual leadership and things like that. And I really enjoyed it. But then I had this moment, this is kind of pivot number one. I had this moment when I was taking, and this is going to sound like a dig, but I was taking all these leadership classes from full-time academic professors. And they were great and they were really kind and really loving, but also they weren't in the trenches in leadership. And I knew that you don't learn about leadership from taking a class on it. You don't learn about leadership from, going to college. In fact, sometimes you learn the opposite of leadership from going to college. You learn about leadership from leading. And so I wrote letters to 3 leaders that I really admired saying, hey, look, like if I can get out of college early, if I can do college in 3 years, can I just come shadow you? You don't have to pay me. I'll take care of everything. I just want to learn, be in the trenches, give me assignments, whatever, I'll do whatever. And one of them said yes. And his name was Reggie Epps, and he actually passed away from cancer about a week ago. But he changed my life and he offered me a job, even though I was just some punk kid. And I got way into the trenches. And so I'm 21 years old with a huge budget, my own office. I got a secretary, leading this big, thing and way bigger than anything I'd ever led before. And so it wasn't like shadowing. It was like, he just threw me into the deep end and that was challenging, but that was formative for me. And then I moved to Los Angeles to be part of this other faith community called Mosaic, which is incredible. We used to meet in a Latino nightclub in downtown LA. So it was really well designed for people who are searching spiritually and maybe have had negative experiences with more traditional religious structures. And so that it was like, oh, wow, they meet in a nightclub. They can't be all bad, kind of a thing. And it's funny, Christians felt really uncomfortable in the nightclub, but new people to faith or people who were exploring faith, they loved it. And that's really who we were creating it for. So that was really fun. Then I did that so I was a pastor essentially for most of my 20s. And then I transitioned out of ministry and started doing consulting and speaking and training, and really fell in love with that. And then I was a coach for about 10 years. And so now really with that, there was a defining moment when I realized that like coaching most coaches are solopreneurs. Most coaches do it by themselves as first and last name.coms. And that was fine. But my whole vocational career was in community, like, on teams and staff and things like that. And so I had this theory, and this is why, one of the core values of nobility is community, that you win faster when you do it with others. And so I looked to my right and my left, and I had a lot of friends who've been trained to coach at the same time. And we're like, well, why don't we do this together? And so we started a coaching firm that's Novus Global, and it's almost 10 years old now. It's coming up on our 10-year anniversary, and it's just been a blast. And now these days I don't coach very often. I have a few clients, but most of my time is spent leading the executive teams of 2 different companies and and being more forward facing, and of course promoting the book and all those types of things.
Yeah. Well, you obviously are doing it right, because you weren't the person that contacted us for an interview. It was someone that works with you. And it's like, you need to talk to Jason. And so that's who you have surrounded yourself with, is really great people.
Thank you for saying that. We have a very fantastic team, and it's really great because one of the fun things about the reciprocity of that is I come on this show as like a delegate, so it's not really like the Jason Jaggard story. In many ways, it's like the Novus Global story, and I'm just one of many coaches in our firm across the country who work with professional athletes and some of the most famous people on earth, and I like so hopefully people who are listening to this, if they're interested, they'll check us out, and people know that when they get me on a podcast, I'm going to rep them versus just rep myself.
Yeah, I loved going to your pivotal turning point, and you leave school and it's like, I will work for you for free.
Yeah, that
was my first, when I started my event management. I called someone, and we had the first woman astronaut coming to my city, and I called them and said, I will do anything to work for you for this event, because I wanted to start an event company. I'll do anything. And at the event, I just did everything, and later they hired me.
Yeah, that's right.
And from that, I got more contracts, because I just do it, just step out. But I think too many times people want to it's like, what are you going to pay me?
Yeah.
And so it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity.
And look, we can empathize a little bit. Like if it's, I wouldn't necessarily work at McDonald's for free, but you do want to, especially if you're a younger leader, although this is probably true for any age, but especially if you're trying to do something new. But if you're a younger leader, you don't want the job that everybody else can get. You don't want the job that anyone else will pay you for. What's the job that would be way out of your league, and then offer to do it for free? And now you're getting an internship that is so much beyond. And that's, in some ways, I was really fortunate, so the guy that I wrote the letter to, he gave me a job, and that was cool. But then, when I was working at Mosaic, the lead guy there is a guy named Earl McManus, and he was awesome. And I got to like travel the world with him and watch him interact. And every now and then he'd throw me in the deep end. And so I suppose, like, find people who are way, way, way more talented than you, get paid whatever, take the job no matter what.
Yeah.
Make yourself as valuable as you can, and learn as much as you can from those people. And that's probably the best way anybody could ever spend their 20s.
Yeah. That was a great answer to a pivotal turning point. Led to great places. Thank you.
We're doing it.
All right. So second question, give us your best principle of success and tell us a story that illustrates this.
Oh, man. Well, when I read that question in the prep time, the first thought that came is like, the best principle for success is to do whatever you can to grow in wisdom. And I know that's a little bit of a cliche for some folks, and especially people who come from like a spiritual background. But I will say this, like, if you can grow in wisdom, you will win faster, you will win bigger, and you'll win better. And, so you'll win faster. Wisdom speeds up success. Mm-hmm. You'll win bigger. Part of wisdom is imaginative and dreaming and seeing yourself the way you've actually been designed versus the way that you currently see yourself, which is almost always bigger than how you currently see yourself. And then better, like, wisdom helps you focus on the things that really matter. And that doesn't necessarily mean not money or not profit. I think that is important, but also how do you do that in a way that enhances your relationships versus erode them or whatever. So wisdom is really, really important. And I think, by the way, I would use nobility as the word to describe wisdom applied. So whenever you apply wisdom, that's you being noble. And I talk about that in our book, in the last chapter, which no one is ever going to read. no one ever reads. I like talking about the last chapter of the book because I know no one's ever going to get that far into the book. I think it's like 10% of all books are read, even like the first 5 chapters. But anyhow, we talk about nobility and how wisdom is nobility is wisdom applied. And so I guess one story from that would be, I guess I'll tell you what. So there's the 4 pillars: prosperity, community, creativity, and generosity. I'll let you pick which one of those values you want me to tell a story about.
What are they?
Yeah, prosperity, community, creativity, or generosity.
Community.
Excellent. So that's the firm. In fact, almost every time we go on, this is an exception to the rule, Lisa. Almost every podcast I go on, and I think we asked you too, and you put the kibosh on it. But every podcast we go on, we say, "Hey, can I bring somebody else from the firm with me on on the podcast, and it's totally fine. Like it's your show. Like you do what you want. And you're not. And there are lots of podcasts who've been like, no, that's not what we do here, or whatever. That's no problem. But again, so many coaches are frankly narcissistic, and they're just into building their own lives and their own careers and their own deal. And at the firm, we are so committed to team and to helping each other and to advocate for each other. And like, in biking, like with the first biker is kind of drafting and everyone else is drafting off of their wake. And I know that in our communities, I'm creating not sometimes the biggest wake, sometimes not. There are other coaches in the firm like Dan Lafallar, who's the head of Nobel Global Sport. He works with all these professional athletes. He creates a huge wake. But I know I also create a huge wake. And so it's like, what am I doing to take people with me? And so I'm doing this podcast in a couple of days. And it was a young woman in our firm. I guess I don't actually know how old she is. She's new in our firm. There's a woman in our firm and very talented coach, but newer to our firm. But she was the one who set up the interview. And so I said, hey, do you want to come on? And she was like, what? Like, you're going to, oh, yeah, sure. And so on Friday, her and I, even though her and I don't know each other that well, but she's a part of our community, and she was the one who set up the podcast gig. Her and I are going to go on and we're going to do our best to represent what we're up to and what we're doing. And what I would say is me having her on the podcast, one, maybe the only thing people remember from the podcast, because what you do oftentimes speaks louder than your words. And so we really try hard. Even when I go public speak, 50% of the time, if I'm public speaking, I'm taking another coach with me. We're on stage together and we're doing the thing together. And there's all sorts of benefits to that, but mostly it's because we just value community around here.
Yeah. Great answer. In your book on growth, you talk about most people know what a growth mindset is.
Yeah.
But you talk about a false growth false growth mindset.
Also gross. It can also be gross.
Gosh, what is that? What is a false growth mindset?
Yeah, well, I learned this from Carol Dweck, who wrote the book on growth mindset. And her research is interesting. Her research was originally designed for children. And so actually some of our other colleagues have taken it and applied it more to adults. But in The Atlantic, an article in The Atlantic a few years ago, I read this article she wrote where it said she was angry. She was like ticked because like anything that becomes popular, like growth mindset or emotional intelligence is another one that's been, really popular. And now people don't really know what it means. And if you think you know what it means, you probably don't know what it means. There's all these zeitgeist ideas like good to great, all these kind of things that come and go. Even like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like Maslow never put those in a hierarchy. He didn't want them to be a hierarchy, but we come along and we kind of structure it to make it like a food pyramid or whatever, as if that's the way that people grow, and it's not how people grow. Anyhow, so Carol was irritated that people were using the idea of a growth mindset to articulate if people have grown. Like if you've grown, then you have a growth mindset, which is ridiculous. That means you had a growth mindset at some point, but that doesn't mean you have one now. And so she was talking about, and we talk about this in the book, how you know that you have a growth mindset, not when you have grown, but when you are intentionally growing in some way. And it's a way of perceiving your own capacity for growth. And what she discovered, and she coined the term, what she discovered was most people walk around thinking they have a growth mindset, but they really have a false growth mindset. It's oriented in the past. It's not oriented towards the future. And so if you're listening to this, a question to be asking is, if you have a growth mindset, the proof of that is, how are you intentionally trying to grow right now? So show me in your calendar the things that you're doing and how you're trying to grow in the things that you're doing on your calendar. And if you can't answer that question, no problem. It's just you don't have a growth mindset, and that's a solvable problem.
Yeah. Maybe you had a growth mindset. That was last week's. You filled up last week's calendar. Good for you. That was last week's growth.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That is great. Right. Which kind of, not that leads me into my third question, but we learn more from our failures and mistakes, than successes. So maybe we learn more from last week's failures and mistakes in our calendars. Would you share with us one of your greatest failures or mistakes and what you learned from it?
Yeah, that's great. So there's little ones and big ones, and I'll do two quick, little one, big one, and then more of a philosophy around failure. Little ones are where we care. One of the chapters in the book we talk about integrity, and we care a lot about integrity, and we define integrity as doing what you say you're going to do. And so minutes before this conversation started, I got a WhatsApp message from one of our graphic designers in South Africa, and she was just doing a friendly follow-up because, or maybe it was another one. We have graphic designers in South Africa and Iran, a few other places. Anyway, one of our graphic designers reached out saying, hey, remember that thing that I asked you to do on Friday that you said you'd do? Which is like a really sweet way of saying you didn't do that thing that you said you're going to do. And that's a I know that that's silly and small or whatever, but in our world that's a failure. We have a high value for doing what we say we're going to do. So I immediately had a conversation with my assistant and I said, I messed up. Like, when they WhatsApped me, I should have immediately said, hey, can you loop Shannon in so she can put that on my calendar? And it never got on my calendar. So I thought that I was going to, like an idiot, I thought I was going to remember that request amidst all the things. And like, your mind, by the way, is the worst possible place to store things you're going to do. But that's where everyone stores things. So that didn't work out. So that's a little failure, but we take that seriously. And so I'm going to have to reach back out to them and say, hey, I broke my word, and let me know if there's any impact. And of course, I'll take the picture. They wanted me to take a picture of me signing the book for social media or whatever. And it takes 2 seconds, but I just forgot, or other things were more important to me than remembering. So there's that. Then a bigger one was, I don't talk about this much, so you're going to get an exclusive. When I transitioned off of staff at Mosaic, I started a company called Spark Good. And Spark Good in many ways was a precursor, kind of an embryonic phase one of what became Novus Global. And I think the website's still out there somewhere. But the dream was to create this small team of people who would go coach and speak and consult for universities mostly. And I talked to my friends Danielle and Johan and Dr. Goody Goodlow, all these people who I've been friends with for years. And I put their faces on the internet, and we're going to do this thing. And then I took a lot of the startup capital that I'd saved to start the company. And this is the big failure. I spent most of it on building these kits. So like, we had this product called Spark Groups, and this is what my first book was about. And we had this product called Spark Groups where people get together every week and they practice taking risks the same way that you practice playing the piano, or anything else you do in your life, because risk taking requires practice. And so I built like a book, and I built this magazine, and then I built these whole kits. And I built them myself. I went to the factories and negotiated the price on the boxes and everything. And I wanted a certain color and blah, blah, blah. And I made a ton of these kits. And I think I did no market research. I never asked anyone if they wanted a kit. And I think we sold I made hundreds of these things and maybe sold 10. I still have friends that are like, hey, I still have this box. And the box, it was a little black box, and it was cardboard, but they painted it for me, even though they said not to. And so when you handle it, you get black on your fingers. And so the paint would rub off. And it was just, and I remember doing a gig in this small town in Illinois. And a year later, they were like, hey, we still have these kits. Can you buy them back from us? And I didn't, the company was ultimately a failure. Spark Good was a failure. I didn't have the money at the time. So I couldn't buy them back. And that was so embarrassing. And I think what I learned from that is do market research before you build really expensive tools for people. And don't spend 50% of your startup capital on don't spend as little as if you're starting a company, spend as little as your startup capital as possible, unless you have investors. Another thing that I spent all my money going to conferences that I wasn't asked to speak at to quote network, but I'm a massive introvert. I hate networking. That was horrible. Networking and kits, and that company, needless to say, did not survive.
Oh, that is funny. I think I did exactly the same thing. Invested a lot of money in event planning videos.
Yes.
And
yes.
And then COVID hit. It was like nobody's using them.
That's the 1-2 punch. Well, it's funny with videos during COVID. You could think, well, that would work out totally fine. But I know so many people. We have even coaches in our firm right now that are putting a lot of energy and attention into making videos for promotion, and they don't get traction. They don't build. And it's just a fascinating, all the things we try that don't work.
Yeah. Well, I didn't look into that. Well, you know what? You can produce the product. You have to market the product.
That's right.
I kind of put all my money in the video and I ran out.
Man. So, and that's, even with books, right? Writing a book is the easy part. If you're listening to this, you want to write a book and you want it to sell well, writing it that's the easy part. Lots of people write books, thousands and thousands and thousands of people every year write books. Hardly any of them break through. And it's because if you don't put 10 times more energy into marketing, promoting, and the relationship side of publishing, no one's going to read your book, with rare exception. And no one ever looks at. I find that fascinating. By the way, at the institute, so I, 2 companies, the firm and then the institute, the Meta Performance Institute, and we have this process called the Navigate process. And in it, we talk about the architecture of success for building your own practice or being an entrepreneur or whatever. And in it, we talk about ability, authority, and accessibility. So ability is, are you good at something? Authority is, do other people think that you're good at something? And then accessibility is, do you have relationships with people who would hire you or refer you? And if you don't have those three things, you're not going to build a business. And it's crazy to me how so many people over-index on ability and under-index on authority and accessibility. It's one of the easiest things to do.
Yeah. We get caught up in, we can go to another conference. We can get the training. We can, whatever. We could go to school for 4 years, but we get out and go, I wonder where the job is.
Yeah.
Okay, you got to put 10 times the effort now to getting the job.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so the MPI, the Meta Performance Institute, is a coaching certification program, and it's the only certification program I'm aware of that teaches people how to build a practice while you're getting good at being a coach. Almost all certification programs only care about helping you be a coach once you get somebody in front of you. Coaching someone in front of you is the easy part. Getting someone in front of you, that's the hard part. Getting someone to give you money, that's the hard part. And so we put a lot of energy into helping people with all of those facets, not just, being a really good coach that no one's ever heard of.
Yeah. All right. Well, I got one more question. We're going to keep continuing on.
Yeah,
at LeaderImpact, we want to grow professionally, personally, and spiritually for increasing impact. Would you be willing to share an example of how the spiritual makes a practical difference in your life as a leader?
Yeah, man. So I was raised in like a Christian faith, and that I'll use that term broadly just because so many people have negative experiences with that. But it was overwhelmingly positive for me, and not perfect, but positive. And there's a verse, and before I ever say verses, it sounds so trite, but this stuff is brilliant and helpful and useful. And just about the Bible specifically, I was listening to a guy that created an MBA program. I forget what his name is, like Jeff Sandifer or something like that. He created an MBA program that rivals Harvard and Stanford and Yale and won all these awards. And he's a person of profound faith. And at Harvard, if you go to Harvard's business school, the whole thing is just case studies. Not just case studies, but the whole thing is case studies. You read like thousands of case studies, and then you wrestle with them with really smart people. And the reason why you do that is because it develops your intuition for business. So like my fiance, she has her degree from a really fancy school, and her intuition for business is so good because she's wrestled with all these case studies. And then so Jeff, I'm listening to this podcast, and Jeff's talking, and he says the scriptures, the Bible, is a series of moral case studies. And I've never heard someone describe it that way, where it's like, it's not prescriptive. Like there's, stories in the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, where like people are killing each other and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, it's not like prescriptive of how to behave a lot of the time. But it is let's read the story and wrestle with it together and be like, well, I don't really like that. And that doesn't really resonate with me. And why would God do? And it's the questioning and the wrestling that really produces your moral intuition to how you can then be a better father or husband or wife or employee or CEO or whatever. So I say to say the scriptures are really fun to wrestle with. And in John 10:10, some people listening to this may have heard this before, but in John 10:10, this is Jesus talking, who has had a profound impact on humanity. And he said, I came that you may have a better life, and a better life than you could even dream of. And I think about that a lot, like, because I can dream pretty big. And to know that, to wonder, is there a God who dreams bigger dreams for me than I dream for myself, is a really romantic and beautiful thing. And so much of coaching is believing more in people than maybe they even have the courage to believe in themselves. And so it's not a coincidence that I was raised in an environment where I was taught that God believes in me and loves me and has given me gifts and talents to use. And even like the stuff that I don't like about myself is all resource to use to do something beautiful in the world. And then taking that, and then when I'm meeting, not all my clients believe in God. Not all my clients, a lot of our coaches come from that background. But we all do, whether we believe in God or not, we all do believe that human beings have been created with incredible capacity. And then it's up to us to choose whether to use that in a way that is honoring or dishonoring of our lives. And so that's just I could go on forever. That's a small example of a verse that's really shaped how I see other people, how I see myself, how I see the world, how I see God, how God sees me. And it affects how I treat people, affects how I treat people in the subway here in New York City. It affects everything.
Yeah. Jason, that was a fantastic answer. See, I love these questions.
Yeah, they're good.
So as
the questions are good, not the answers.
Well, questions are fabulous, or the answers. What
Gross mindset.
Yeah. So as earlier we talked about Proverbs, and you're doing the the study of that, and I was doing it. This morning, I texted my friend Proverbs 24:10. If you fail under pressure, your strength is too small. Now that's New Living Translation. I'm not sure what it says in King James, but but that just grabbed me this morning. You know, you fail under pressure, your strength is too small.
Yeah, and somebody listening to that may be like, yeah, duh.
Yeah.
But also it's worth thinking about and listening. And I'd be curious what the proverb before and after is, because oftentimes they're putting like couplets, so then there's wrestling there. But it is, if you're listening to this, to be reflecting on what are you trying to do? Are you strong enough to do it? And if not, how can you get stronger? Like, what are you doing to get stronger? Is a wonderful question. And that's, that's just my kind of take on that verse as you're bench pressing that verse. Is like, man, I want to be as strong as I can be. Where do I need to put myself? How do I need to grow in order to lift the things that maybe God has called me to lift?
Wow. As I bench press that verse, I've never heard that. Love that.
A lot of people think that like the Bible is like a pill you swallow to be right. Oh. And I really believe that it's more like a gym for you to go into and bench press so that you can become strong. And so it's a fundamentally different way of looking at something that's been weaponized to oppress so many people.
Right. Oh, good answer. All right. Those are my 4 questions that I've asked everybody, but there's always these 2 questions that since the inception of this, I asked these 2 questions of all my guests. So LeaderImpact is dedicated to leaders having a lasting impact. And as you continue to move through your own journey, have you considered what you want your faith legacy to be when you leave this world?
Yeah, I think about this every day, actually. It's one of my favorite questions to ask other people. I was in because like it's like legacy, it's like purpose. I was in Eastern Europe, and we were on this trip with a bunch of very successful business people. I was one of the least successful people in the room, and we were meeting with American diplomats in Germany and things like that. And I was sitting down with this guy, and he was reading the sports section, but he's talking about this basketball team, and he knew all these things about this basketball team that you cannot know from reading the newspaper. And I was like, "Are you like a super fan?" And he was like, his friend who was sitting at the table was like, yeah, he owns the team. And I was like, oh. So I was like, what's small talk like over breakfast with someone who owns a basketball team? And so I was like, I said like 2 questions. What's your purpose and what's your legacy? And he looked at me kind of like, dude, I'm just trying to, it's like 8 a.m., like, would you just calm down? But I do like asking people that question. So I think about it all the time. And 2 things about that come up for me. One is I think a lot of people, when they think about their legacy, I split my time between New York and LA. And in New York, you have these big buildings and these people starting these massive companies. Oftentimes they name the companies after themselves. And then you have in LA, you have stars and celebrities and who want to be remembered, and they want people to remember their name, and whether they want to be a Walt Disney or a Steve Jobs or whatever. And I don't really care about whether or not people remember me so much in terms of legacy. I don't necessarily care whether people remember my name, but I care a lot about how my life is going to positively impact the choices that people make 1,000 years from now. So how can I live my life in a way where generations from now, people are making really noble, courageous, wise choices, and they have no idea where they got it from. Maybe they think they got it from their grandparents or their great-grandparents or whatever. But what they don't know, what they'll never know, is that, 900 years earlier, I bumped into somebody, a married couple at a party, or we worked together, or they heard me speak or read a book or something, and we got to have a conversation, and maybe they changed my life a little bit, and then hopefully I changed their life a little bit, and that permanently changed the trajectory of their lives to where the ripple effect was, kids living on Mars are loving their spouses and being good parents and seeking to give more than they take and seeking to be honest and brave and those types of things. And so that really excites me and brings a lot of meaning. That's what I love about coaching is you get to, I recently spoke at a conference in Vegas with one of our first clients. So we worked with them 10 years ago, and then they brought me back kind of to celebrate the book. And so many people came up to me and said, oh, tell Amanda I said hi. Tell Dan I say hi. Tell David, tell Janet I say hi. Because they coached me for 3 months and it changed my life. And they would have notes and they would have quotes and things. And man, I just love coming home to our offices and saying, hey, I was in Vegas, and people who you haven't talked to and probably forgot about, 5, 6, 7 years ago are telling me that you changed their lives forever. And that's fun. That's worth doing this work.
Yeah. They didn't forget about you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. That's a nice thing to share with those people is to go back to your staff and, people you work with and say, hey, that guy said something, nice. I do that to parents. When parents have great kids, I'll say, if I'll run into their child at the store and they were great service, wherever it was, I will out of my way to call that parent and say, like, your son today. And right.
Yes.
They made a difference to me today. Yeah.
That's so good. I love that. And, and if you're listening to that, be like that. Be like Lisa. Seriously, that's really worth emulating when you see people who are going above and beyond, not only to praise them, but to find out where that came from and say, hey, it's working. It's work. I know that you especially parenting. It's such a thankless job in some ways. And to know this thing that you taught them, they listened, they remembered, or maybe you didn't teach them, they just picked it up from you. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm only 1 month away from empty nesting as my children
congratulations.
go out. So it's like, I've done my job. I hope that I have raised them and let them go.
Yeah. Well, and the Proverbs talk about that. The Proverbs talk about, I love the Proverbs. It talks about kids, hey, make choices in a way that just, obviously there's limits to this, but like make choices in a way that really make your parents proud. Yeah. And I don't think kids realize that they have such power to make the day of their parents a million times brighter just by them going out in the world and being decent human beings. And then, parents, it's fun to say, like to you, Lisa, I'm excited for your kids. Because your days of being proud of them are only beginning. Like my parents are so sweet. They my mom makes a Christmas, for every book I write, she makes a little Christmas ornament of the book, and I can hang it on my tree. And my parents are so proud of me, and it feels so good to not that I'm doing it to make them proud, but it does feel good that when I do what's most in my heart, that also makes them proud.
Yeah.
And I think everybody wins that way.
Everybody wins. Oh, that's awesome. So my last question is, what brings you the greatest joy?
Oh man. So I gave a talk one time. Maybe we can put it in the show notes. It's one of my favorite talks. And it was a sermon actually. So I speak at churches sometimes. And my buddy, Joseph Barkley, who now is the president of our institute, and he's one of our best coaches. He's awesome. At the time, he was also leading this faith community, and he would let me play. That's why he let me play. He let me speak. And he's such a great leader. The evidence of that is that most speakers want the show for themselves, and he was really generous. And evidence of that was he would allow me to speak sometimes. So I gave this talk at the church was called Radius at the time. I gave a talk called "The Gospel According to Ocean's 11," and it's one of my favorite talks I've ever given. It's a twofer. There's the talk before that was something about Willy Wonka. I can't remember. But then the second one was the Gospel According to Ocean's 11, and I talk about how in Ocean's 11, I love heist movies. I don't, if you're listening to this, like The Sting, The Italian Job, all the Mission Impossible movies are kind of heist movies. And then Ocean's 11, of course, is kind of like quintessential heist movies. And you think about like, why do people love those so much? And why do I love it so much? And it's because it's a group of uniquely gifted individuals coming together to pull off the impossible and to have a ball doing it. And that brings me the greatest joy. I'm having the most fun when I'm partnering together with people who are different than me, and we're trying to do something really hard but fun. Create an amazing coaching company, or to go into a company and help defibrillate them and help them light up on fire. So coming together to do something and then having a ball doing it. Every year at our annual retreat, I just pinch myself. This past year or 2 years ago, we were at Lake Tahoe, the Ritz-Carlton, and there's 50 coaches from all over the world, and I'm just like, man, I just can't believe we get to do this. This is so much fun. And that's true, by the way, in work. That's true, like when we meet with me and my fiance, when we are serving other people together, when we're volunteering, or when we're focused on either on double dates or whatever, like just focused on making other people's lives better. That just makes me so happy. And and by the way, it's a drug. If you're listening to this and you've never been able to be on a team where you're just having a ball with other people, I highly recommend it, and do what you got to do, even if it means doing it for free.
Right.
Do what you got to do
Yeah.
to get on a team and have a ball doing it.
Oh, well, Jason, it has been the best 40 minutes ever spending this time with you. I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your day. I'm sure you're a busy guy, and I am just thankful to have spent this time with you.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate you. And thanks for doing what you do with LeaderCast. It's like 300 and some.
350 cities around the world.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it is. And I think being part of it, and I mean, I'm part of many groups. We meet every week, and we talk about that in the ending, but sharing the stories of leadership.
Yeah.
You get together and sometimes you don't understand a book. We do leadership books and you get to talk about it because you think you know it all and you read it.
Yeah.
Or even Proverbs, doing a study, you're like, yeah, I know what that means. And then you don't. And there's so much more. And so being part of it has been a blessing in my life.
That's awesome. Well, leadership, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for getting leaders to get together and talk about how hard it is, because it is hard, and how we can grow it and do better and how we can support each other. It's really, really important. So thanks for doing what you do.
You're welcome. So if anyone wants to engage with you or find you, what is the best whale? Oh boy, it's a whale. What's the best way to do that?
I mean, I'm on Instagram and the socials and things, but also you can go to novus.global. That's our company website. You can go to mp.institute. That's our institute site. And then I'm very proud of our podcast too. It's, we have 3 different shows on our podcast called the Beyond High Performance channel. And then we have a podcast on coaching, which is coaches talking about coaching. We have a podcast called the Meta Performance Show, which is me usually talking to really impressive people like Ed Catmull, the former president of Pixar. And then we have one called Your Finest Hour, which is where we actually have a client and a coach talk about their relationship. We go behind the curtain of a client-coach relationship. And so all those, if that's helpful to your audience, please check those out, and we'd love to hear from you.
All right. Well, thank you again. It has been a pleasure, Jason.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, if you are part of Leader Impact, you can always discuss or share this podcast with your group. And if you are not yet part of Leader Impact and would like to find out more and grow your leadership, find our podcast page on our website at leaderimpact.ca and check out our free leadership assessment. You will also find on our webpage Chapter 1 of Braden Douglas's new book, Becoming a Leader of Impact. It is an amazing leadership book. You can also check out groups available in Canada at leaderimpact.ca, or if you're listening from anywhere else in the world, check out leaderimpact.com or get in touch with us by email, info@leaderimpact.ca, and we will connect you. And if you like this podcast, please leave us a comment, give us a rating or review. This will help other global leaders find our podcast. Thank you for engaging with us. And remember, impact starts with you.